Here we start out with our original raw file of an image that I call Out There. It's a pretty new image. It was only taken last week, and that's the before, and that is the after image. So it's not that big of an edit difference, but we're definitely going to get there. So let's take a look at how we do it. So we're pretty fortunate to have a good raw file to begin with, and that really does help things. Getting it right in the field the first time is so critical, because you just have less to do at home and you tend to degrade the image less in editing if you get it right as best you can in the field the first time. But regardless of the raw file, the first thing that I see that strikes me on here is the contrast. This is a really, if you think about it, a really contrasty image, so I really got to make this pop. It's beautiful as it is, but it could always use improvement. So the first thing that I see are these beautiful like canyon lines here. And that's what really makes this area so cool, is the geology, and I really wanted to push that. So to do that, I'm using Viveza 2. This is a part of the Nik Collection plugin, and all I did with Viveza 2 is really make the structure pop out here. I added increased structure, and I did some shadow adjustments on these cliffs to really make them pop. And that is the result of Viveza 2. It also kind of helped the water too. That was something I didn't intend to do, but it ended up happening, so I'm good with that. So the canyon walls really pop with Viveza 2. And the next thing I did, now that the cliffs were nailed down, I wanted to really make this a little bit warmer. And to do that, I went to Color Efex Pro, and I used the skylight filter at a 20% to really help these cliffs up here really just pop. And that is the result of our skylight filter up here. That's before and after. Big difference. And also you can see the water really warmed up here, especially in here where the eye is really going to go right in here. Next, I added a curves adjustment layer, and to do that you just go to adjustment layers, curves. There it is right there. And the curves layer was used to really make these cliffs here and this line here pop. This is where it's all converting right here in the middle, and that's what the curves layer is going to do. And there it is right there. So it's before and that's after. It just really helped where the part of the lake here converges right in here. Really made it pop. After that, I added a tiny little bit of dodging, but what I did was I used a pretty cool technique here. If you go to this new layer tab down here, you hold Alt or Option, and you're going to have a prompt that comes up here. I go to Mode, Soft Light, and it's going to prompt fill soft light neutral color 50% gray. Always click Yes. Hit OK, and it's going to create an all 50% gray layer. And I just picked a color that's warm to really just to make all this pop and strike out. And that is the result of this. Look how beautiful that light looks right in here. Big difference. It's just enough of a change. But then I can lower opacity if I want up here with this slider. Really powerful technique. We probably could have stopped there, but I wanted a little bit more punch. It's just what I do with my images. I went ahead and did a gradient fill. With that, I went to adjustment layers, gradient, and I added kind of an orange color to offset this yellow that's up here. And what I did here is I just put on a white mask and just brushed out where I didn't want in black, which is right in here. And that is the result of that. Look how beautiful that's starting to look. Just with these little tiny steps, giant difference. You have this beautiful light soaking in across there like that. After that, I'll go ahead and merge them all together, which is hold Shift, Alt, and E, or Shift, Option, and Command E on a Mac, and it just creates a layer stamped on everything that I just did. And you can see it's a little brighter here. And why is that? Well, I do a little technique here with this dodge tool. And what you do is you paint in dodge wherever you want in here. And it really helps to make the foregrounds pop out like that. That's before and that's after. I didn't do very much, just enough to make the foreground pop a bit. These trees here in the front. Next, I had a Norton effect. I usually do a Norton effect on my images. One rule of thumb when you're doing a Norton effect, really make sure you don't have it affected the foreground, because if you think about it, Norton effect is supposed to imitate light, and light is usually happening in the back of a scene, not in front. So to me, Norton effects in the front just look weird. You can if you want, but notice my mask here is all black in the front and visible in the back. After that, I stamped it all together, and you could see a little bit of a difference here. And all I did here was use Edit, Transform, and I'll go to Distort. And all I did was just stretch this up a tiny bit, because what happened is you could see a tiny bit of sky horizon here, which I didn't think was really necessary. So this kind of tightens up the composition a little bit. Not very much, just a little bit to stretch it. The next thing I did was accentuate these shadows in the water. That I think was very important. So all I did was just do a tiny little, a very tiny S-curve here in this curves layer. And all I did was make the water affected. That's before and that's after. I think that was pretty important to kind of make those shadows pop a bit. And the last thing I did was I added a little bit of color on these hills. Notice how muted they look. Granted, that's supposed to be how, this canyon is hitting the light and everything, but I wanted this color to pop a tiny bit more. So all I did was I just added a selective color layer, and I targeted the yellows and the greens, and that's all I did. And you can adjust your colors where you want in here. And that's before and that's after. A little bit of a change. And you can even lower if you want to. Like that. If you want to. But I kind of like it at about 40. Right there. And the last thing I did, pretty important, was I added a hue saturation layer. But I kept the saturation a little lower on here. I just affected these cliffs. So I don't want the color to be so oversaturated. So all I did was just desaturate it a tiny bit. And then I held Alt or Option and I clipped it onto the selective color layer. So that's before, that's after. So all together, we made a pretty dramatic change from there to there in a few steps, not very many steps. So pretty cool.